Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Gillian Keegan, elected as an MP in 2017 following a career in business, now the government's Minister for Apprenticeships and Skills. Appointed Labour's Shadow Housing Secretary last month, previously on the front bench team of both Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn, Lucy Powell. Joining us down the line, former Finance Minister of Greece, economist, member of the Greek Parliament and founder of the left-wing Mera Party, Yanis Varoufakis. Kavita Oberoi, tech entrepreneur and specialist in healthcare, one of Channel 4's Secret Millionaires and a panel member on the BBC's The Apprentice, You're Fired. And a key advisor to the Republican Party over 2 decades, from Newt Gingrich to Rudy Giuliani, and king of the focus group, Frank Luntz. Good evening. Welcome to my panel here in the studio. Welcome to you, Yanis, joining us down the line from Athens. That may be the closest we get to Greece this summer. Gillian, I'm sure will be able to tell us if that's not the case. Welcome to our QT50 audience. Very good to see you again. And of course, welcome to you at home as well. And do join in the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time, and we'll hear what you've got to say. So our first question tonight is from Chris Oram.
Good evening. Is the European Union having its sausages and eating it?
Lucy, of course, we're talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol.
We are indeed. Well, it's a very good question. I think the issue here is that the Northern Ireland Protocol is a direct consequence of the type of Brexit that Boris Johnson and this government wanted to have. They didn't want to be part of the customs union or the single market or the other options, and they don't want to align on issues like food standards and veterinary standards, which if they were to align with the EU, which is now what Biden's asking them to do, then that would reduce many of the issues that we're seeing around the Northern Ireland Protocol at the moment.
And should we just explain why Chris is referring to sausages? Because exports of sausages and other chilled meat from Britain to Northern Ireland will effectively be banned at the end of this month because they are not coming from within the EU.
And they're being subject to quite a lot of checks and so on at the moment. And the Prime Minister actually said the Northern Ireland Protocol solution was ingenious and that it would not result in any checks, in any barriers or any borders. But that is now what we are seeing. In effect, there is now a border down the Irish Sea.
So what would you do differently right now?
Well, what we're saying, which is what Biden's now been calling for, I think, in the last 24 hours, is that the British government should agree to align with the EU when it comes to food standards and veterinary services. And that would get rid of most of the issues that we're seeing. Because, of course, the government have said they want high standards in food safety and so on. So there shouldn't be any problem for that. One of the reasons that the Tory party was so against this issue of alignment was because they thought that would stop them getting a trade agreement with the US. Well, of course, now that we've got this change in administration, we're seeing a big change in tone. So the government now need to get on with it. We do need flexibility on both sides and compromise, because the EU can be quite absurd sometimes as well. But there is a way through this if the government's prepared to take it.
Well, Yanis, you've got fairly extensive experience of dealing with the EU, not always happily. So the question is the European Union having its sausages and eating it? Is it the EU being difficult, or is it the government not really having signed up to something it didn't really understand?
Both London and Brussels are behaving like spoiled brats. Boris Johnson has to confess that the price of ending free movement of people is that he terminated the free movement of sausages between Britain and Northern Ireland. He has to acknowledge the impossible triangle, as I call it. You cannot simultaneously have a regulatory divergence, no border within Ireland, and no border down the Irish Sea. You can have 2 of the 3, you cannot have all 3, Boris. At the very same time, the European Union has been misbehaving. They seem to misunderstand the fact that, on the one hand, yes, they do have the legal right to inspect every great British banker that travels across the Irish Sea, but to do this is an abuse of their legal right. We've seen that already with the President of the European Commission trying to cover up her own vaccines procurement fiasco by banning exports to Northern Ireland. Maybe this is the sausage war or crisis we had to have so that some common sense prevails. Both sides have to accept that they have to work closely together, so we might as well do this harmoniously.
And Frank, what about Joe Biden's role in all this? After all, obviously as the American on the panel, he's come over here. There's been lots of briefing beforehand that he's going to try and bang heads together and try and get some kind of compromise.
It actually bothers me because I think America's been a little bit too loud and too involved in too many things that it should leave to the UK and Europe. We had a president for 4 years. I mentioned to you that I was lucky enough to see Mr. Trump just before he left office, and I walked up to him and I asked him, what does the J in Donald J. Trump stand for? You know what he told me? Genius. I don't think that that's really what we need right now. I think that the U.S. needs to remain a little bit quieter and let the European Union and the UK sort it out.
And do you think Joe Biden can play a role in that? Do you think he should?
I think he should play a role of cooperation, compromise, and common sense. I think those are the three terms that America should be doing going forward, but certainly they should not be dictating policy. We need to speak a little bit less and listen a little bit more.
And I know you obviously resident in the UK for many years. Go and show the audience your shoes that you put on this evening. Let's have a look. You can just stick them out the side.
Oh, I actually just took it off, but...
There we go. So this is Frank making the point here that this is a British story.
Is that you being a little bit quiet?
That I love the UK or that The Who is my favorite rock band. It's one or the other. But for Roger Daltrey, here you go.
So sausage wars, Gillian. I mean, we heard Lord Frost, who was, of course, negotiating Brexit, saying that we underestimated the effect of the protocol on good movements to Northern Ireland. In fact, saying the government didn't really understand what it had signed up to, and now it's having to deal with it.
It's like Yanis said. I mean,
well, presume it's also like Lord Frost said.
When you have, there's a difference between what we say and what actually goes on in the border, right? So trade agreements are incredibly complex.
Hang on, when you say it's a difference between what we say and what...
No,
are we not supposed to believe what you say?
Let me get it out. I promise I'll explain it to you. It's like Yanis said, you know, they have the legal right to inspect every sausage. They probably have the legal right to open every packet and inspect every sausage. Is that reasonable? And is that necessary? So what happens when you put these things in place? And sometimes they take a bit of time, which is why we had this period to bed things in, to get some of the practicalities out. But what happens is there's many things you have. You get trusted trader status. You basically say, we know that sausage is staying in a supermarket in Northern Ireland, and it's going from the supermarket in Northern Ireland to a frying pan in Northern Ireland. It's not going to the EU. You get sensible, practical solutions. What has happened is we've had the period of time which was supposed to iron out some of these technicalities. And what's actually happened is they are using the legal right to basically make it impossible almost to get these goods onto the shelves in Irish supermarkets.
And this is not something that you saw coming? Not according to Lord Frost, anyway.
No, not at all. I mean, you wouldn't expect that there would be such a harsh implementation that you can't get things onto the shelves in supermarkets, not at all. And it's not as if, I mean, what they're concerned about is this being a backdoor into the single market. So I understand they want to keep the single market protected. But what we're talking about is goods going from the UK to Northern Ireland for consumption in Northern Ireland. There is sensible approaches. And what we're urging is, look, get round the table. We haven't got time now, time's short. Let's just get some sensible approaches so we make it a bit easier for these things to be exported.
Okay.
And we all want the same thing in terms of the Belfast Agreement, the peace settlement.
I can see Kavita is desperate to come in.
Yeah. Gillian, I think this is bigger than the sausage war. What surprises me, it feels like, you know, you're saying that we didn't understand what we were signing.
I didn't say that. I've worked in business for 30 years. I understand it.
OK, so Lord Frost made a comment in the FT over the weekend.
He said we underestimated the effect of the protocol on goods movements
how it
in
will be
Northern Ireland.
implemented.
OK, so in business, when we're two parties, we sign agreements, and once we're signed in on the dotted line, that's gospel. OK, that's gospel. And if we didn't understand, we'd seek legal counsel at the time. And I think what's happening now, obviously the Northern Ireland Protocol, I don't know the detail, obviously it overrides the Belfast Agreement, and that's why we're having these issues. And obviously it has to be worked through. But, you know, from a business perspective, you have to look at what you're getting into, and we've got into that now. So no wonder, you know, everybody, the EU, like you said, Yanis, are behaving like spoilt brats, and we've got contentions over in UK, but those agreements were signed. and those agreements are there now. So I'm going to be very interested how we're going to be able to navigate out of this now. And I really feel sorry for the people in Northern Ireland and the peace there, because it's really now going to affect people. So I think it's bigger than sausage wars.
OK, let's hear from our audience. There are quite a few hands up. Ariane.
Once upon a time, our word was our bond. We signed an agreement. We did it at the last minute. Maybe there wasn't enough thinking. What other problems are we going to have from the Brexit agreement we signed at the end of last year? The thing is, if we sign an agreement, we should stick to it. If we haven't done the homework to work out that it's a sensible agreement, then we have to sort things out. I'm afraid this mess is very much about getting Brexit done as quickly as possible without thinking of ramifications.
I agree.
Martin?
Yeah, just something Lucy said. I question whether or not our animal welfare standards are below the EU standards. Is that the Labour Party's position?
No, I would say the opposite, actually, that we have very high standards in this country, so we've got nothing to fear from alignment with the EU. We've got those high standards, and in fact, it's the government's ambition, I understand, to kind of raise those even higher. More. So I don't understand why we are so fearful of that when it is something that won't scupper a trade deal with the US and would enable the free-flowing movement of sausages and other goods.
Does that answer your question, Martin? Is this something that you... forgive me, Martin, I don't know if you voted for Brexit or against Brexit?
I voted for Brexit.
And is this how you thought it would turn out in terms of Northern Ireland? Are you happy with what you see?
In all honesty, Northern Ireland wasn't my biggest concern when I voted to leave the EU, but it is something that is becoming a bit of a dog's dinner. The government really do need to get control over this for all types of export to Northern Ireland.
Sherry?
Renowned for being a bit petty. They're the ones who came up with the rule that you couldn't actually sell a banana because it was the wrong shape.
The EU's... Well, there's some conjecture. I don't think that's actually true, but certainly it was written up a lot in the papers at the time, but actually it turned out not to be true, Sherry. But always interesting to hear your view.
It was another bit of fake news, I think, that one.
Tony?
Well, I think the point stands.
Well, it's not true, so I'm not sure that it does stand. But Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. Good evening, panel. It's an absolute nonsense, isn't it? I mean, there's nobody suggesting for a minute that the chilled meats coming from the mainland to Northern Ireland are in any way unsafe. Come on, EU. Accept the fact that the Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. And let's get round the table and sort it out. I mean, the people in Southern Ireland must be appalled because it must have an impact on their free movement as well and free trade. I mean, these things can all be sorted out if there's just a willingness on both parties to get together, address it with some common sense and move on.
So, Gillian, what are we expecting to see? I mean, the mood music coming out of the meetings between the EU and the UK at the moment is not particularly harmonious. Yeah. And
we have been there before as well.
Of course, and the UK is threatening to unilaterally increase the grace period.
We have been there before as well.
So therefore, not to ban sausages and other chilled meats going to Northern Ireland. Is that likely to happen, do you think?
You know, in my experience, and, you know, I was interested in what Kavita said, one of the things I've learned is that these kind of agreements are nothing like any business agreement I ever did in the 30 years that I was a commercial negotiator. They are...
Well, I'm not surprised, because it was undoing a trade deal of 40 years
even
standing.
The Belfast Agreement, I've read tons of these things now. They're written at a very different level. They're deliberately almost written at a very different level so that you can get these things started and then they evolve over time. So it does need to have good faith and good faith negotiations and discussions. They absolutely require that. Now, we have been in this position before where there's a bit of a leverage play. It goes right up to the wire. It seems to be what happens. But hopefully with President Biden urging some sense as well, that we can come into the room, we can have a sensible... It isn't actually rocket science to absolutely sort it out. If there is trust and goodwill, you can come up with solutions. As Tony said, you know, the things... Nobody thinks that the sausages or the meat, that they're going to be, you know, mass swarming into the EU and upsetting some balance of trade, or that they're going to be unsafe. Neither of those things are true. But they are deliberately at a different level, which is something I found very interesting, actually, when I started to work in politics as opposed to business.
All right, I'm going to take another question now from Hannah Garrett.
Hi. With the exponential growth in case numbers in the Northwest, should the country extend the lockdown, use local restrictions, or unlock as planned?
Well, this is obviously, as you say, Hannah, cases are growing exponentially in the Northwest, growing much more slowly across the rest of the UK. Kavita, extend the lockdown, use local restrictions, unlock for all?
Okay, so number of perspectives. Right from the start for business, obviously it's been really, really challenging from the start. In business, you have to be driven by the data. Any decision making is always driven by data and statistics. And I think right throughout, the government has been the best at managing and looking at the data and making those decisions. And you know, last week we've had 7,500 cases, which has been the highest since March. Now, I know that we've got less hospitalisation, vaccinations are there.
So do you think we should unlock on June the 21st?
Well,
I mean, that's the big
well, I was going to say, for the younger population, my concern is I've got a 21-year-old and I've got friends who've got 21-year-olds who have now got long COVID. So for me, I think we should be very careful about those restrictions. I think we should have localised restrictions if need be, because we don't want to go into a full-blown lockdown again. And I think we still have to think about health. Health is wealth. And you know, and we've got to navigate through this.
So local restrictions would be the way forward. If
yeah, absolutely, and yeah,
Lucy,
well,
as a Manchester MP,
yeah, I mean, with respect, I'm not for local restrictions. We tried that before, and it didn't work.
But given that it is so much worse in the Northwest,
it is, and it should be no surprise to us that, because we had it much worse last time round, and we were sort of ahead of the curve, if you like. Last time round, which is why I think that some of the measures that are now being brought into Greater Manchester and Lancashire could and should have happened many months sooner. Vaccine surges, testing surges, doing a lot more to enable people to get their second doses, doing a lot more on that long tail of, we've done really well at quick vaccinations of the willing and able, but those that still haven't had their vaccine but are in the qualifying groups, we need to do a lot more to get those there. I mean,
and on June the 21st?
Well, look, what the situation is in Greater Manchester and Lancashire is that it is mainly younger people who are getting the infections. The vaccine is working. Those over the age of 65, the numbers almost flat in that. And hospitalisations as a result are much lower and are quite different to what they were.
So on June the 21st?
Well, look, I think what I want to know about the June the 21st is we would all like it to happen. I always thought that the whole idea of a big freedom day, of a massive unlocking, was a bit of a misnomer and has raised expectations in the wrong way. But what is the plan B if that is not going to be the case? I've not heard anything about that. I don't know what economic support is going for businesses that would still have to close. I don't know what we're going to be doing about the rising infections. So in Greater Manchester, that's having a massive impact on young people at school. There's huge disruption now because it's racing through secondary schools and colleges. Businesses are having to close because increasingly staff are getting pinged by the app and have to stay at home for 10 days and so on, and making business unviable. So in the event that we do unlock, what's the plan? In the case that we don't unlock, what's the plan B? And what would be the terms under which further restrictions would ease later on?
Okay.
I feel we have quite an absence of leadership on that at the moment.
Gillian, I'm sure you can answer all those questions. I'll come to you in a minute. Beth.
So I think we saw from the last time when there was varying local restrictions and the different tiers across the country, it became a bit of a logistical nightmare with nobody really knowing what was happening. There was no real control over it. People leaving London just before Christmas and going back up. And I think it's an infectious disease. It's not going to respect the borough boundary where you've said that you can't go to a nightclub. So I think ultimately you need to think about delaying from June 21st to keep the rest of the country safe and also to keep young people in the Northwest safe as well.
Dale?
Hi there. I think that it needs to be, we just need to lift it. And we know hospitalisations are going down and obviously the infection rates are, but nobody's going into hospital because that's going low. So now,
I mean, Dale, just to be clear, hospitalisations they're going up More dramatic in the north. They're going up slowly, very slowly. They're certainly not going down.
Yeah. Okay, Fiona. But again, now we've gotten into a pandemic of mental health with people staying at home and being in lockdown. So we now need to move from that. And now we know that we have to live with COVID, and this is going to be our new norm. So I think personally we need to lift it. And 21st needs to just try and go back to how we was before.
Okay, Natalie, what's your view?
I think for me, I live in Manchester and my parents live in Liverpool. And when we had the local lockdown in Manchester last time, my dad, who's a taxi driver, said the amount of people that he was picking up from Manchester was so high. So I feel as though going down the local lockdown approach, it's a bit of a sort of false safety, because a lot of people won't respect that and they'll just go somewhere else anyway. So all you end up doing is just then spreading the COVID to the other areas where maybe it's not as high. I feel as though, you know, we say about following the science, and I feel as though that's what we need to continue doing, and just look at how it goes and then respect what the sort of science tells us.
Joe?
I think that easing the restrictions too quickly could really cause us some catastrophic problems. We've got students that are going home from university very shortly. There'll be a big movement of people across the country. I certainly feel very uneasy about going into a supermarket without wearing face masks. I will still continue to do so, but you can't legislate for other people. And I think whilst we have a variant on our hands, which is demonstrating to be extremely contagious, I think we need to be very mindful of how we manage that. And I don't think anybody would have an issue with continuing the restrictions we've currently got. I think we do have a degree of freedom that we haven't had in lockdown. And I think if everyone's happy that it keeps them and their family safe, I think they'd continue to respect that a lot more. So I think we just need to be measured, and I think we do need to follow the science. And I think the government should really be mindful about over-promising and under-delivering when really they don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, listen to the science is my opinion.
Now, Gillian, obviously I won't ask if we're going to unlock on June the 21st or not, because you can't say, and we're going to find out on Monday. What about Lucy's point that if I presume there is a plan for if we do unlock, and if we don't unlock, what is it?
Well, I mean, I don't have a plan of whether we do unlock or don't unlock. That will be being discussed at Cabinet. That will be being discussed at Cabinet. They'll be meeting all over this weekend. So, first of all...
They must have met before to discuss it, though.
The lockdown is...
I was just wondering what you can tell us about.
The lockdown must be irreversible, right? That is what we've said. We've said there'll be 4 stages. The first 3 stages have gone well, and we have been able to unlock. And all of us have really enjoyed those freedoms. I was in Liverpool last weekend seeing my parents, and I haven't seen them for so long. It was just fabulous, right? So we've all been able to do some things.
And if we don't unlock on June the 21st, will there be more support for businesses?
Well, it is, of course, the first... You're jumping ahead. The first thing to do is to get the evidence, get the data, decide. These are the tough decisions that government have to make. We've had to make them all along. You know, there's a lot of people who want to go slower. There's a lot of people who want to go faster. The impact on business is devastating. The impact on events and the summer events is devastating. There is nothing easy about these decisions. I haven't seen the data. The government is getting the data. Clearly, we have the furlough in place till September, and we have, you know, we've done this before, right? We know what the pieces are in terms of local lockdowns. What we've basically said at the moment is we're doing surge testing, and you know, we're opening longer. We've got buses, pop-up vaccination centres. We're trying to get more people vaccinated. People
but
are
not extra
forward.
Vaccines, actually. Just I know, Andy.
Not surge vaccines.
But you need to do that. It will protect the whole country.
Well, JCVI disagrees, and we have followed JCVI every single step of the way. And so far, they've been bang on. And if you look at where we are, we're now vaccinating under 25s. We'll have done 80% of the population by the end of this week. We'll have done 80%
But the impact of COVID on people in Bolton and Greater Manchester and Lancashire, who've gone through waves of this now,
I understand, Lucy,
is much greater than it is for those of the same age who live in the southwest.
We have scientists for a reason. They look at all this.
You don't always listen to the scientists. You don't listen to the
we
scientists.
We do listen to the scientists.
Portugal.
We do
listen to the scientists.
Let me bring Frank.
I've been through this in the States. Don't do this. Seriously. They deserve better. We now have a situation where Democrats get vaccinated in the States and Republicans don't, because Republicans saw it as being a political issue. This is the one case. I understand that you want to be in government. I understand you want to keep government. This kind of stuff actually makes them confused. All they want are the facts. All they want is the truth. All they want is substance. Please learn from us.
We're only arguing about the supply of it, not the principle of it.
We've got very, very high uptake of vaccines.
Yes, you've been
and
a
it's
success.
actually growing. It's actually grown in the last
This country's been a success, and we have not done as well as you have. Congratulations. Just on this one issue, don't politicize
No,
it.
we're not. It's just getting the vaccine.
That's why the JCVI are there, because they're not politicians.
Okay, you told us that. Thanks, Gillian. Yanis.
My concern is that we shouldn't take for granted the capacity of the state, of organized society, to impose lockdowns. The more we delay opening up, the more deadlines we violate, the lesser the capacity of the state, of the government, to convince especially young people to follow the rules. As far as I'm concerned, especially given the great success of your vaccination program, unlike the European Union's fiasco, our rate of vaccination now has reached 20% of fully vaccinated people here in Greece. It's pathetic. Given your success, it is important not to continue with lockdowns, but to invest a lot of effort, money as well, in suppressing the virus, in persuading people to get vaccinated, in tracking and tracing those who are not, and doing the hard work of carrying the population with you. That, for me, is the #1 priority for Britain now.
Okay. So, but you also give them the evidence.
Yeah.
Virtually every doctor has gotten vaccinated. Why? Because they know the facts. They know the information. It's not enough to say you should do it. You actually have to give them facts behind it, that the vaccinations are safer than what we take with the flu and more effective, that you have a responsibility not just to yourselves, but to your family, your friends, and your community. We have to make the case. They have to know the facts. And when they do, they'll choose vaccinations. I'm very impressed about this population.
Absolutely, I agree. Public health messaging is really important, having been worked in healthcare for the last 20 years. And it's about reaching those communities who don't understand or have those fears. They're going onto YouTube, they're seeing these stories in their communities, and they have a fear of the vaccine. And those are those communities that are at highest risk, the poorest communities at high, and those are the communities that we're not reaching. So we've got to invest more into public health messaging. We've got to do that.
But
and it's not just anti-vax either. It's because it's accessibility. Yeah. Sometimes people aren't on the GP. There's language barriers. They're not on the internet, so they can't book themselves in. They're waiting for a call still. I know loads of older people who are waiting for a call and they've not. So we need to put more resource into that longer tail.
I've actually worked on meningitis uptake, and we did all these things when we were working with CCGs. People were going out, phone calls, door knocking. You've got to do all these other things, because otherwise those communities aren't going to be heard.
Can I just tell you that Black, British and Asian communities have tripled the uptake since February and April. And those people now who say they'll definitely get the jab have gone up 20% in the under 45s and 20% in the Muslim communities. Okay. The messages are getting through.
That's because they've seen what's happened in India.
I think that's true.
Definitely.
I think that is true. I think that is definitely true.
Why?
Absolutely. We still need Plan B, though, Gillian.
And I say this to everyone who's there right now. I had a stroke 1.5 years ago because I behaved badly. I caused it for myself.
Meaning you were living an unhealthy lifestyle?
A very unhealthy lifestyle. I am so focused on people getting vaccinated because they know that it saves lives. They know that it works. It is absolutely 100% undeniable. So if anyone up there who has the chance, your participants here, or anyone watching, has the chance to be vaccinated, please don't make the mistake I made.
Let's take a question from Rose. Rose Butlin.
Yes. How is it justifiable to cut foreign aid in a global pandemic?
So the UK government has reduced aid spending from 0.7 to 0.5%. Rose, this is what you're referring to, of national income this year. Gillian.
Well, first of all, international aid is vitally important. It saves people's lives.
OK, but you're cutting it, so how is it justifiable to cut it? That's the question.
It's justifiable to cut it because, well, first of all, we're still one of the biggest spenders still in the world and in the G7, the people who are meeting this week. It's absolutely true. And by the way, more than Labour ever spent during their whole time. They never got above 0.5% all the way through their time in government.
OK, well, you're
so just
now
to put
at
that in
0.5%.
Just to put that in context. So it's £10 billion, which is a lot of money. And it doesn't include a couple of things that we've been spending on in the interim.
The question, Gillian, the question is, how is it justifiable to cut it? So
I'm just about to justify it.
Well, let's get straight to it.
Just about to justify it, on the tip of my tongue. So as well as the £10 billion, which is a lot of money, there's things that we've spent this year which will benefit those people who need it most, these people who need this international aid. The first is we invested in the development of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is 1/3 of all the vaccines that have been done in the world is that vaccine that we paid for. We invested in that. That's the first thing. We've put £500 million into COVAX. That's the second thing. And the third thing is we have said we will work with the G7, this is going to be discussed in the next couple of days, to vaccinate everybody in the world by the end of next year, which will involve us giving some vaccines and rerouting vaccines, etc. We know that. They'll be working on the plan. That is on top of the £10 billion, which is still one of the biggest aid spend in the world. And of course, we know why we've made that, because we've been investing in all these other things, which I think personally will be a greater benefit to the international community. Right now, the greatest benefit to the international community is to get everybody vaccinated. That's where we've shifted the priority. But, you know, it is important.
And when you've got the Common Speaker calling on the government to grant and a vote to MPs on this issue, are you going to do that?
I don't know, to be fair. I don't know. I haven't got the answer to that. But we're also streamlining aid. There was a lot of random projects in
OK, no, but
we're streamlining it.
I need to let the rest of the panel in. Lucy?
Well, quite honestly, I think it's pretty shameful when we're trying to lead the world, hosting the G7 and other actions, that we're cutting the percentage of GDP. Because let's not forget, it is a percentage of GDP. So when you have an economic crisis, as we have had in the last year, that amount reduces because it's a percentage. So it would have reduced anyway due to the pandemic, but the government have decided to reduce the percentage as well. And it does take us below countries like Turkey, like Saudi Arabia, in terms of contribution to aid in this world. And I think that is pretty shameful. The only one of the G7 countries to do this action.
I mean, we still will be the second biggest donor.
Still second biggest out of the 7.
Well, we'll be taken over by France and Germany because they're not cutting. And as I say, it takes us way behind some other countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And why is it a good thing to do? Because as we've seen with the Indian variant, what happens abroad affects us at home. And if we cut aid at this vital time in things like healthcare services, because it's not just about the supply of vaccines, it's about having the programmes and the infrastructure on the ground to get those vaccines into people's arms. We'll see a rise in refugees, we'll see a rise in military conflict and other issues that affect us here at home. That's why we have that moral obligation for foreign aid spending of 0.7% of GDP, something that Labour Party brought in because we had a very, very low base in aid spending beforehand, and it has worked for us.
I don't understand this. It's not how much you spend, it's how you spend it.
Yeah.
Is the impact meaningful and measurable? Do you actually change people's lives, and can you prove it through the data afterward? The public doesn't oppose foreign spending, doesn't oppose foreign aid. They simply want it to be efficient, effective, and accountable. So you get more for less. So you actually do what you promise you're going to do. And if you fail, people are held accountable.
Well, I think, in that way, I think it's the worst of all worlds then, because what the government are doing is saying they're only going to cut it for this year.
Why do you always attack the government? They're asking for solutions. This was a specific policy. And everything the government does is correct? No, it's not. If we want to actually, and this is my commitment, and this is why I'm here in the UK, to make a difference in the democracy. I know how much the U.S. has been destroyed by debates like this. I know that we can't have these conversations anymore without insulting each other.
We haven't insulted each other.
Don't make.
Lucy's a friend.
Don't end up.
We just have a very different view on this issue.
No one's insulting each other yet, as far as I'm aware, Frank.
No, I would never insult Lucy.
The goal should be to find the common ground. And the goal should be about measurements rather than numbers.
But I understand
but this is a
you're
cross-party
talking about
issue as well.
investing in the right bits and de-investing. I understand some of the cuts have been made in water. And, you know, I know, and the cuts are temporary. And think about, you know, children, the number of children who are probably going to die through this because they haven't got their immune systems there and that water isn't sanitised. And, you know, for me, I'm really passionate about women and children. Women aren't going to have access to emergency contraception and all those things. And, you know, we're going to have bigger implications. So, you know, I think we can get through this.
But £10 billion is quite a lot to spend on those things.
We've been spending stuff on things that probably we shouldn't have been spending on.
I agree, that's why we're going to streamline.
Yeah,
but
I'll come to you in a minute.
Is
I'm just going to hear
important.
a little bit from our audience. Alex.
Sure.
I do think it's shameful and unjustifiable to cut the amount of foreign aid. We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and so it's right that we give one of the largest amounts globally through aid. It's a huge part of our global reputation, and quite frankly, the wealth that we have in this nation was in large part built through exploiting the human and natural resources of less economically developed countries. We should be helping them out at this awful time of pandemic.
Tony.
With a vaccine.
Fiona, thank you, and panel. We should stop beating ourselves up. I mean, when we look at the developed nations, and I think that one of the panelists got it wrong. I don't think it's GDP. I think it's a percentage of actually gross net income.
Of national income, yeah.
So let's get the facts straight away. And so don't beat ourselves up. I mean, we've been one of the biggest contributors. I think we're in the top 5, and we bring it down from 0.7% down to 0.5%. The majority of developed countries, there's something like 40 countries, are nowhere near 0.5%. And those countries include USA, Japan, France, Greece, and many, many others. They don't even come anywhere near 0.5%. And we're going to bring our target down to 0.5%. But then if we add our vaccination program to the world, it's quite possible that our contribution will go up way above 0.7%. So I don't think we should beat ourselves up. I think we should check the facts, see what we're doing, add all the numbers together, and find that we're still a very big contributor to the rest of the world with overseas aid, either in monetary terms or in more practical terms.
Richard.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, I think chap on the panel has got it absolutely right. Let's stop politicising this and being more political, and let's work out what it is that we need to do. Lots of people are putting money into this, and lots of people with money need to give to those people who haven't got money. But what is it that we're trying to achieve here? Pounds after pounds, euros after euros, cents after cents, dollars after dollars are going into this pot. And all we're doing is saying more needs to be delivered, more needs to be delivered, more needs to be delivered. Where is it going? Who's getting it? Let's have some feedback as to the good that it's being done, and then maybe we can go to the next step of saying, right, let's now put our hands in our pockets even more.
Yanis?
The direction of change is all important. You see, it's very different to say that, okay, let's find out whether we should be spending more money on a shelter for battered women in the Sudan or victims of a civil war. It's quite another to say, we have been funding these particular centers, and now we're going to defund them and turn these people out onto the street or to the dirt. That is a morally obnoxious decision to make.
Absolutely.
This is the definition of a false saving. I really do not understand what has got into Boris Johnson, because the saving is insignificant in the grander scheme of things by comparison to every other piece of expenditure in the budget. I can only explain this as an attempt by some part of Boris Johnson's universe or inner cabinet, to appeal to voters who always get excited by the thought of defunding, bloody foreigners. But if I may say, Fiona, because Gillian mentioned vaccinating the world, I think it's important to look at some very stark numbers. Since the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, the G7 central banks have printed $9,000 billion supporting the banking system, quantitative easing. 9,000 billion, $3 trillion. The International Monetary Fund 3 weeks ago estimated how much it would take to vaccinate humanity. Everyone, with 2 doses of, whatever it is, AstraZeneca or Pfizer or whatever. And the total sum came to something like 33 billion. 9,000 billion has already been printed. 33 billion would be enough to vaccinate the world. The G7 central bankers should do that tiny little thing that is necessary, a little blip in their printing presses, would be sufficient to pay for the vaccination of the whole world without the taxpayers funding anything.
Becky, you've had your hand up throughout this.
Yeah, so I would agree completely with the points that have just been made. I do think that it's shameful, and I think we're almost just forgetting the human side of this. Countries are these conceptual things where we've put barriers and borders in place, and there's been wars to try and get more land and power. And actually, there are parts of this globe where you've got horrendous suffering. People are dying as we speak and suffering as we speak. And then you've got other parts where there's a massive amount of wealth. I don't think it's helpful to compare ourselves to other countries and say, well, we're doing more than they are, so we're absolutely fine. Well, they're still suffering. So I think while there is evidence to show that these contributions are making a massive difference, we should continue to make them, plus sending vaccines over. I don't think we should just be decreasing funding at this time. I think it's ridiculous.
OK, we've got another question. I want to take it now, which is from Will Drakes.
Yeah, hi, Fiona. Is taking the knee habitual tokenism or a massive step towards tackling racism?
Now, of course, Will, you're talking about the controversy there's been about the England football team taking the knee. I mean, Wales has taken the knee as well, for example, and then the booing that then came after it. And there's been comments on either side saying that it's a good thing to take the knee, and others thinking, as you say, that it's tokenism. I mean, Frank, I wanted to come to you. Obviously, this in sport, this started with Kaepernick back in 2016.
And my opinion changed over time. Initially, I was very hostile to it because I thought that it was a direct insult to our men and women in uniform. The whole reason for these...
Why did you think that happened?
Because it was done for the Star-Spangled Banner. It was done at the beginning of a football game, and it was done during the Star-Spangled Banner.
During the anthem, yeah.
And so my issue, but I've changed. My opinion has changed. I think that everyone has the right to express their point of view, and if you are fortunate enough to have a platform like we all have here, then you should be willing to use it. But we also have a responsibility as well. And if fans want to express their opposition to it, they have the same right. We should be encouraged.
So the fact that they boo, you think is equally valid?
I believe that we should be encouraging speech, not limiting it. And this is my fear of cancel culture, my fear of the moving towards woke, that we will do a better job if we can discuss it, if we can talk it out, can debate it out. And we are a much more open society today than we were 12 months ago.
It's quite hard to have a debate in a football stadium, though.
But I just don't think that any chilling of freedom of speech is helpful to anyone at any time. Simply decide when you want to raise it, decide what you want to say. I've been having points of view here in this discussion. I don't speak every point. I know to keep my mouth shut. I'm a foreigner here. I know that I have limitations.
Despite your Union Jack shoes.
I was going to say.
Because I love the United Kingdom, and I hope that it reigns, and I hope that it remains unified. I like it here, and I like what you all represent here. And for that gentleman up there, for the population who said that this is a good country, you know what? You are. You're a great country, and you deserve our respect.
Kavita, habitual tokenism or a massive step towards tackling racism?
Well, I think, we have to tackle racism, and you talk about freedom of speech. And again, you say booing. So booing, what message does that send if we're supporting that? And obviously we've had all these statues, etc., that have been coming down.
In terms of the game itself, because obviously there's been huge problems of racism within football.
Yeah.
And then some fans have said, well, we booed the taking of the knee, but then we cheered the black players afterwards.
But there's been lots of racism towards players. I mean, from a personal perspective, growing up in the 1970s, I was called a packy and abused on a daily basis at school. Okay, as I got through the 80s and 90s, I felt that happened less. It wasn't a nice thing. Okay, and we're still getting this in this day and age. And I think, if the footballers or celebrities have got a platform to raise this and drive a change. That's what we need. We saw Marcus Rashford drive a change with the schools, and he drove a policy change. And we need the government to get behind this, to drive changes and change people's mindset, because we shouldn't be now still experiencing all that racism, because I know what it feels like.
Rose?
I just think it's so important because it keeps the conversation going. That's what the movement is about, keeping those conversations and making the changes that we need to accept that we can all be slightly discriminatory in the way that we behave in society. And it just keeps that conversation at the forefront. It's not about being unpatriotic to take the knee. It's about progressive patriotism for me. And it's about learning and knowing what Britain is now. And that is a multicultural, diverse society where we need to accept that we need to be more tolerant and we need to be more respectful to people. And if this keeps the conversation going, then keep taking the knee. I'm all for it, and it should continue until we reach that point and that is acceptable.
Absolutely.
Jo, what about you? You were nodding along to some of what Frank said. I couldn't tell which bit you were agreeing with.
Well, I think his sentiment's spot on. I think there has to be a degree of respect, and I think it's a very tricky subject. I think people are very loath to make their comments, as I am now, because if you disagree with taking the knee, you're being seen to be racist. You might not be racist whatsoever.
And what's your feeling, Jo? I mean, this is a forum to speak your mind. I mean, do you feel that taking the knee isn't something you particularly want to see?
No, I don't think it is. I think what's happened when it was done initially, it had a really dramatic effect, and I think people stood up and took notice. And I think now that their attention's been got, and we've seen it in sports throughout, that they've all boycotted social media because of racism. I think there are other more proactive ways to tackle racism and make statements without taking the knee. And I do think the more we see it, I think it becomes just the norm. It doesn't become something that's a dramatic step change. And I think the sentiment around it raises awareness, that's right. But I think people will get tired of it, much like they're tired of woke, much like they're tired of being told what to think. So I respect that people do it, and I understand why, but I do think it is starting to reduce the effect it had in the first place.
Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, no, I have issues with taking the knee. I completely understand the sentiment behind it, and I'm absolutely behind it. Racism must not be tolerated in society at all. But we've got to change the mindset of people. We've got to change how people behave. You know.
And do you think taking the knee is not helpful to that, or perhaps not helpful to that anymore?
Well, you know, I don't actually understand what it's achieving. We've got to educate people. We've got to have a zero tolerance towards racism. And taking the knee is great, and I absolutely am behind, you know, showing your support for anti-racism. You know, however, taking the knee, it's sort of reenacting the situation that George found himself in at the end of his life. And I'm not entirely sure we should be replicating that all the time. I just think we need more education, and we need to see more actions in society. And that is just the bottom line, and that's we need to see more actions.
Okay, obviously it did start many years before George Floyd. I mean, I mentioned Colin Kaepernick in 2016.
But she's right, which is, do you want to make a statement or do you want to make a difference? And she's talking about making a difference. So bravo to your point.
Gillian.
The key point about all of this, and I think we've heard it in the audience, is there's nobody who wants to, you know, who doesn't want to end racism. It's disgraceful. It's so impactful, harmful, and discriminatory, and it does still happen today, and we know it still happens today. But what's happening here is this in itself is actually being more divisive. It's creating new divisions.
So do you think footballers shouldn't take the knee?
People have to make their own decisions, goes back to free speech.
I'm just asking your opinion.
But actually what we've ended up with, whether it's the statues, whether it's the Queen's picture, whether it's taking the knee, we've ended up with these things being things that kind of divide us. And actually, united societies are what solve these big issues. They'll what solve climate change, they'll what solve racism, they'll solve the vaccine situation we've been talking about, the global pandemic. You need to be united to do that.
So what's your answer to the question,
divisive.
Gillian? Is taking the knee habitual tokenism, or is it a massive step towards tackling racism? Do you think taking the knee by footballers is a good idea?
It's not my judgment to say whether they should take the knee or not. They're perfectly
I'm just asking
free.
your opinion. That's what you're here.
They're
You're here to express your opinion.
to do what they want. If you want to say, do I think it's symbolism more than action? Of course it is. Of course it is. As Frank says, you know, there's a symbol about it, but the most important thing is the action. But we've seen it's creating division. And by the way, the people who are booing, I'm pretty sure most of them would like to end racism as well. They disagree. There's a lot of things that have been, you know, there's different things that people are interpreting. There are some Conservative MPs who are very much against it. Why? Because Black Lives Matter stand for things that they don't stand for.
Well, habitual tokenism is a comment by a Conservative MP.
Well, it's really about defunding the police and the overthrow of capitalism, which is, you know, the kind of Black Lives Matter, the actual political
That's the political. I mean, Gareth Southgate
and some people will take it, and some people will think that's supporting Black Lives Matter. I'm sure Black Lives Matter think it's supporting them. I'm sure they do.
Well, the England manager, Gareth Southgate, has written this letter. I'm sure you're aware. A beautifully written letter, but saying basically talking about football's duty to wider society.
Yes. And it was wonderful. It was wonderfully written. I very much applaud his leadership on that point.
Lucy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I very much agreed with Gareth Southgate's letter, and I think everyone should read it, because actually I disagree with Gillian on this. I think the division has been created by those who don't want to have a conversation about the message, and there are still those people, and those people every day abuse black football players who find themselves on the end of it, whether it's publicly at matches or whether it's on social media and elsewhere. Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford,
Got out for that, right? That was why.
Yeah, but I think they feel fed up that hasn't made the progress they want, and I think that's why what Gareth Southgate was saying was so important, that we can be, and we are, an absolutely patriotic country that upholds traditions, but at the same time demanding progress on issues that still blight our society. And I'm afraid racism still exists in our society, and there are people who want to make this a kind of woke issue or a divisive issue or whatever. Gillian,
and others have talked about statues and all that kind of thing.
I disagree with that profoundly. These are a group of these are football players who have a platform, who've got fed up with the fact that they're still on the wrong end of racism all the time in 2021, and they want to make a stand. And it has started a conversation. And yes, of course, it's not actually, you know, making things change necessarily, but it's having that conversation, and that's their right to want to keep it on the agenda. And I think it's important that it does keep on the agenda.
Yanis?
We would agree with that.
I think it's actually brilliant that England players are taking the knee, feel the need to take the knee, and that some people boo them. That's also fine. I'm with Frank on this. Because
so why is that
football,
fine?
Not just
Yanis, let me ask you, because why is that fine? Because there are plenty of people who think it isn't fine.
Let me tell you why. Because there are, you know, football has traditionally attracted racists, even neo-fascists, you know, British National Party people. Of course, this is a small minority, but it's a vocal minority, and sometimes they can influence. In fact, good people are standing next to them who are also booing, joining the booing, because they think that they're standing up for England. Quite honestly, they think that. And, you know, I'm all for unity against racism, Gillian, but I'm not in favor of papering over divisions. It's important to have the conversation that we're having, and we would not be having it if there was not this kind of division on the pitch. Back in the 1980s, I remember I used to live in England then, it was considered divisive. The fact that many of us were demonstrating against apartheid when Margaret Thatcher was supporting apartheid in very, very vociferous terms, even supporting the continued imprisonment of Nelson Mandela. And look at you in the Tory party. You've been shifted. This is wonderful. This is how democracies work. But if I may add one vignette, Fiona, that's when that's my view regarding the crowds. When it comes to individuals, take for instance the young cricketer, I don't remember his name, the 19-year-old who was a 16-year idiotic person.
You're talking about Ollie Robinson, the England cricketer who tweeted or put stuff out on social media, which he has now apologised for, but he's been suspended by the England Cricket Board.
What I want to say is that, regarding a young person like that, we should embrace him gently, firmly, but lovingly as well. So we should be kind to individuals and therefore try to persuade them and confront the mobs.
And that's why the show is so special. This is the best English-speaking news program anywhere on television.
Oh my God, Frank, we'll have you back.
You got 25 people there, 20 people there, who get a chance to articulate whatever they want. You guys have a chance to respond to the public. This is what we need more of. If we had more shows like this, more opportunities like this, there'd be less anger, less frustration, and less people feeling like they're ignored or forgotten. They matter. Your audience, your participants here matter so much. And that's what we need to do in our democracy. It's what we need to do in business. It's what we need to do in society overall.
Well, let's hear from Alex. I know you wanted to come back in. I could see you waving your hand there.
I just wanted to mention that I find it an issue that I'm quite conflicted about it. I don't watch football. The only time I've seen footballers take the knee is when it's shown on the news. But I go to the theatre a lot, and I would get a bit
you used to go to the theatre a lot, you mean?
It's open.
Well, I used to, and look forward to, again, hopefully, in the not too distant future. But it would become a little frustrating if at the start of each show, all the actors had to come out and take the knee. And it would, I think, soon become a bit of a pantomime, a symbol rather than action. I think it's the right message, but maybe the wrong forum.
I just think really good leadership and education is the key to change. And how can we work together, united, to drive that education? That's what needs to happen.
Absolutely.
As you said, some people don't understand what the knee is about. They're not educated enough to understand that. And
well, actually, the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, said, on this and take the knee thing, maybe it's got a broader history. It seems to be taken from the Game of Thrones. I'm not sure he really...
I think he said I last took the knee to propose to my wife.
He said, I'd take the knee for two people, the Queen and the Missus, when I asked her to marry me.
The Queen as well.
So I'm not sure he was totally familiar with Colin Kaepernick either.
No. He probably wasn't, no.
Sorry, Kavita, I interrupted.
That's what I just wanted to make a point. I just think that's the way to go. We've got to educate society.
OK. Hannah?
Yeah, so there's a very famous Martin Luther King quote that the biggest stumbling block to freedom is the white liberal. It's who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. So you may not agree with taking the knee, you may not like it. If that is how somebody wants to express themselves, if you want to stop it because it creates tension, are you really fighting racism, or are you just wanting people to pretend everything's okay?
Well, no one wants to stop it, right? No one said it has to stop.
Will, let me come back to you, because you asked the question.
Yeah, I agree quite a lot with Yanis and what Frank has said, that, and what a lot of the audience members have said, that if it's what people want to do to show their opinion or show their support for each other, I think it's absolutely right. I think we've got to be really careful, though, because words like racism stick. So I think the people who are booing, I don't think the vast majority of them are racist. I think they are bored with politics getting in the way of sport. So I don't think we can call them racist, but I do think that the individual racist people do have to be called out, and something has to be done about them.
And just briefly, would you like to see taking the knee stop at the beginning of football games?
No. Again, if it's what the players want to do to support each other, then that's absolutely fine for me. It's their right to do it.
OK, well, I have to say, I thought that was a fascinating discussion. Our hour is up, so we are out of time. Thank you very much to the panel for coming along tonight. Frank, thank you for your very kind words. You're definitely coming again. Yanis, lovely to see you. Last time you were, was it when you was with you, Lucy? You were on another programme. You said that after the programme you were going to go off and swim on the beach. Wherever it was, you're saying some Greek island. We can only fantasise about swimming on a beach. Anyway, soon. Lovely to see you from Athens. And thank you very much to our QT50. As always, really great to have your participation. And to you at home, thank you so much for watching. From Question Time, bye-bye.